I'm rephrasing it. I didn't go into exactly, there are some exact things that serve the purpose of helping us to step through the experience. But this is two individuals, one whose peace is being disturbed by animal abuse, and another whose peace is being disturbed by child trafficking and child abuse and those things, right? I'll stick with one of the questions because the other one had a similar trajectory, so I'll use the one thing. So what we're committed to doing today is going right into the moment where you're having the experience and applying the 5 truths, right? My focus is my superpower. I can choose to live in a state of peace no matter what is unfolding or happening externally. My inner peace comes from within, not from outside, comes from the source energy within me. There's always peace within me. I can choose from where I'm seeing, and I can choose truth versus illusion by recognizing the perspective of source. And of course, uncovering our eyes so that we could see through the light that we are, not through the circumstances of the world, okay? So here I am sitting in front of my computer. From whatever means, I become aware that elephants are being abused in Africa or India. I can't remember where it was, right? And the person's words were, I have been suffering a lot over the state of the animals and the way in which they're being treated. As powerful as my unique ability to remotely heal others, whether human or animal, I am one woman, and I get very discouraged because there's so much and so many who are suffering, and it's getting worse. So now let's step through all of that, right? And this person shared that they were researching where these animals were, and found pictures of them, etc. Same for the person who was focused on child trafficking. Notice the word that I used. Focused on child trafficking, focused on animal abuse. My focus is my superpower. We're going to truth. We're going to truth. My focus is my superpower. I can affect my world, inner and outer world, not just the elephants, but I can affect my inner world with my focus, right? I'm gonna come back to that in a moment, because it is my superpower, right? So here I am. Somehow I'm aware that animals are being abused. Somehow I'm aware that children are involved in child trafficking and there's child abuse going on. In the moment that you become aware of that, you now have a choice. Do I continue to put my focus there? Or do I put my focus elsewhere? Because whatever you focus on will expand in the world. And I'll really step you through all of that in a minute. But so there you are in the moment, you're behind your computer or your mobile device, and this story is playing in your mind, right? In your mind, there's a story that says animals are being abused in India or Africa or whatever. Elephants are being abused. So if elephants are being abused and children are being abused, what are my choices? When you go with when you're in that moment, like right now in that moment, and this happens with any aspect of the news. There's a war going on in the world. Innocent people are getting killed, whatever it is, right? You become aware of that. You have a choice. In the last event, I said, it serves us to be able to notice when a thought is knocking, rather than the thought comes up and we directly go do what the thought says, right? So for each of you, both of you who wrote in, the thought said, go look for stories about this. That's the thought. The thought is knocking. The thought says, hey, now that this story is rolling around in my mind, why don't you go look for some pictures and more evidence that this is true in the world? That's a thought. knocking. You don't have to obey that thought, but that thought is knocking. You know, you should research that. You should research abuse. You should research animal abuse. You should research child abuse. That's the thought knocking. If we're not bringing awareness to that moment, we have no clue the thought is knocking. We don't even know it was a thought. We just go straight directly to researching and looking for pictures and looking for stories. Why are you looking for that? I'm aware, all of us who are here today, we are aware that people are dying every minute. We are aware that there are murders in the world. We are aware that there are animals being abused, children are being abused, adults are being abused, the planets are being abused. There's abuse all over, right? Through wars, through all kinds of stuff. I already know that all of that is happening. I don't have to go looking for evidence of it. I already know. So the thought knocks. If you're unconscious in that moment, you just go with what the thought says. You don't even pause. You just go with what the thought says. And so both of you said you're behind your computer or behind your mobile device looking for pictures of abuse, looking for pictures of abused animals, looking for pictures of abusers or whatever you're looking for. But why would you take your focus is your superpower? Why would you want more of that energy? Now, I know that some of you may say, because both of you claim your healing powers, well, so that I can heal. Trust and believe. You can heal without any knowledge of that. I have no knowledge of that. I have no knowledge of the specifics of child trafficking. I don't have any knowledge of the specifics of these animal abuse situations that you brought to my attention. So I'm not suffering. Suffering is a choice. It's not a mandate. I'm not suffering. However, ironically, between 3 and 4 this morning, because I tend to wake up between 3 and 4, as I shared with you all previously, between 3 and 4 this morning, I was a little bit alert, a little bit awake. And what I felt compelled to do was to move light through the planet, send light energy through the planet. And specific things would come to mind and I would send light energy there and send light energy there. Same as if you were aware of what the animal is. You don't have to be aware of a specific child or a specific animal that's being abused in order to send healing energy to it. You can decide, my focus is on healing. My focus is not on the stories of abuse, because you can choose a focus. You can choose. If you choose in an unconscious state stories of abuse, then you're choosing suffering for yourself. And the irony is, both of you are saying that the children are suffering and the animals are suffering. But what a vibrational match that you're also suffering. You're also choosing suffering. You're self-inflicting suffering, right? Again, my focus is my superpower. If my focus is my superpower and I go harvest stories of abuse in an unconscious state, you're doing that, right? You're making that choice. Again, what I want to do is raise awareness to the moments in time that these things are happening, so that the more awareness and the more light you're applying, the more you're able to make a choice that elevates you, the planet, the situation, and everything. We're not done with this particular thing. There's more that we can uncover here. So that's a moment in time where you can make a different choice. If you remain in an unconscious state and you continue to seek out stories of, all of us can do that. I could Google right now, who got murdered last night? So I could send healing to that family. I don't need to know the details of the story in order for me to send light. I am light. And regardless of whether I'm aware of the story or not, I can set aside a segment of my day to move light through the planet, to see light energy being descending on all lives. And we'll come back to the all lives in a second. Premise number two that we can apply to this situation, because that's one area in which the focus that you choose is a choice to suffer, right? And if we choose to suffer in that moment, awareness that that's my choice. You don't have to suffer. When you are engaged, like when you were engaged in the activity of sending healing energy to the children and sending healing energy to the animals, you weren't suffering in that moment. You were feeling the healing. Both of you said, I felt the healing coming from me and going to the child. I felt the healing coming from me and going to the animal. You're not suffering in the moment that you're having experienced healing. You're suffering because you're seeking out stories of suffering. And if you know that you have sent healing to that child or to that animal, now you're like, it's doing better because I sent healing. I know they experienced the healing. I know they experienced the healing. I know that, and there's a certainty within you. Both of you said that I was certain that the energy that I sent had an effect. More about that in just a second. So premise number two inserted in that moment, right? Because we're applying truth to the moment that you're in. I can choose to live in a state of inner peace no matter what is happening externally. How is it that you can choose peace knowing that people are dying in the world, people are suffering in the world, children are going hungry in the world, animals are being abused in the world? Because you are predominantly source. Source is not suffering. If you align with the source energy within you, you are not suffering. In fact, you're seeing, one of the statements that you made is it's getting worse. The reason you have the perception that it's getting worse, because it's getting worse in your world, right? The world that you choose to focus on, it's getting worse, because if you seek out stories of suffering, of course, it's always going to look worse. But the perception of the source energy within you is this world is expanding. There's more love coming into this world. There's more light coming into this world. Therefore, you can tap into a state of peace from your higher self, not your human self. Peace doesn't come from your human self. Human self is just riddled with all kinds of suffering. It comes from your higher state of consciousness. You know that I, as a vessel of light, will continue to pour light into this world because light is who I am. And because I and others are continuing to pour light into the world is getting to be a better and better place. I see it, I know it, I claim it on behalf of Earth. I claim it on behalf of the Earth that I'm participating in. That's what I claim. More into that in a second. So this is where you can choose to live in a state of inner peace, because you have an awareness, you're aligning with the perspective of source, right? Premise number two, your inner peace. Premise number three, your inner peace comes from within. That's how you can stay in a state of inner peace. Now, in that moment, let's go right in that moment. In that moment, now we'll assume you've made a different choice, right? The thought knocked and said, go research suffering. And you said, nah, I think I'll research light, love, healing instead. I'm aware that these elephants are somewhere. I don't know where exactly. I don't need to research it. I'm aware of their names or whatever I saw or somebody mentioned it or something. I don't have to research it any further. I know this is taking place in the world. So you made a different choice. You were standing at the crossroads when the thought knocked. But this time you were like, I'm staying awake in this moment. I know what that thought is inviting me into. I'm staying awake. So you decide in that moment, I will not be researching stories of suffering, because that just expands stories of suffering in the world. If I'm taking my focus and placing it on suffering in the world, then I'm expanding the suffering in the world, the same suffering that I want to see less of. So we can withdraw that, right? Withdraw that energy from the world and bring that back and go, no, I'm expanding love, light, healing. And here's another powerful way in which we can do that in a second, but I'm expanding love and light. I'm sending healing to the animals. I'm sending healing to that region. I'm sending healing to wherever they are, right? I don't have to research it. So you made a different choice in that moment, right? We're going moment by moment here. I'm taking my time, moment by moment. So the thought knock said, hey, spend some time researching suffering. You go, nope, sorry. That's not what I'm called to do in the world. What I'm called to do in the world is elevate healing. Different choice made. You understand that your inner peace comes from within. So you go, from where am I seeing? Because if I only see through my human eyes, I only see suffering. But if I choose to see through the eyes of the source energy that is within me, things look a little different. Because when I tune into the source energy that I am, I see how much I can affect, just me, one person, how much I can affect the energy of this planet by what I choose to focus on. I see that because I see what source sees, because I am not separate from the source that is within me. I see that because I'm not separate. I see that. And you see what's possible. You see what's possible. And because you see what's possible and you feel what's possible and you align with healing, not the trauma, not the drama, you align with the healing, you feel different because of what you've chosen to align with, right? Premise number 5, I choose truth versus illusion. The illusion is the suffering is happening, it's getting worse and worse. That's illusion. But it's what you choose to see because you went with the thought that said, go look at a lot of suffering. Well, if you look at a lot of suffering, it really looks like the world's going to hell in a handbasket, right? So if you make a different choice, you see truth. The truth is this: who can argue with this planet is evolving? Who can argue with that there's a wave of positive energy moving through our world? Who can argue that is happening? That's absolutely happening. And the more we align with that truth versus the illusions of suffering, right? Because when I say illusion, it's like we focus our energy on how things look in the 3D world, right? How things look through our human eyes. But there's a more expanded truth at play. And if we choose truth, we see the world is shifting. Even as of 2020, it's like the world is becoming an entirely different place in a positive direction. A lot of drama is coming to light so that we can see it and shift it and change it, right? So when you move to the perspective of source is not worried about what's happening. Source is certain of what's going to happen. There's a certainty. Why? Because source knows that every single human being is light. Regardless of the choices that they're making, they're light. Let's take that even further. So one of the things that one of you shared in the animals and children suffering, I think it was the animal one, where you sat for 2 hours sending energy to those suffering elephants that are being abused. Beautiful. You ready? I hope everyone is ready to see things differently right now. She sat for 2 hours sending positive healing energy to those animals. And then she also wrote, I am convinced that it had a positive impact. Hang on one second. Okay. Sometimes what we have to do is turn the light on in our own mind first, right? So there's a part of you that said, if I send healing energy remotely to this animal in India, it is going to feel it. It is going to affect. In fact, I'm certain, because I am a powerful healer, is what you said, right? In that very same moment, this is where the shift has to happen, right? In that very same moment, you said, I feel so much suffering around this. And you said, those bastards, how dare they do this to these animals? You ready for a shift? The same human being that spent 2 hours sending healing to these elephants is the exact same human being that can spend 2 hours sending healing to who you perceive as bastards. With the same degree of conviction that you're healing them in the same way. Why stop with the animals? Why stop with the children? Are you able to see things differently? Are you able to embrace that as truth as well? What does that look like? In the moment that you're perceiving the abuser, this is life has you at a crossroads right now. In the moment that you are perceiving the abuser and you say, bastards, no, you turn the light, you take the, wait, you take the covering off your eyes, right? It's like, wait, hang on. They are an aspect of source. The person, this is how you move through it in a different way, right? I'm right there with you in the moment. In the moment, I'm healing the animal and I'm perceiving the abuser to be a bastard. And then I stop. I went, wait a minute. No, that's an unconscious thought. They're not a bastard. How could an emanation of source be a bastard? That's my perception. And in this moment, I'm going to change my perception so I can change the world. In this moment, I'm going to change my perception because I want to change the world. I want to affect change within the world. So here's how you do it, right? This is just an example. The mind said, aren't they bastards? You go, whoa, no, that's not how I choose to perceive them. They are equally as much light as I am. They're just not letting the light in. So I'm going to spend 2 hours on the animal, and I'm going to spend the same damn 2 hours on you. I don't know who you are. I don't know your name. I'm not even going to call you an abuser because you're light. And I know that you're light. And if I put a label on you that causes me to see you in a certain way, I have to peel the label off first. I'm not even going to see you as an abuser. I'm going to see you as a reformed human being. And what I'm going to do for the next 2 hours, because I regard the human just as much as I regard the animal, being equally deserving of love and light, equally deserving of love and light. And in the moment that you perceive the abuser, you start the healing process. You are light. I know that you are light. You are love. I know that you are love. You are source energy. I know that you are source energy. In this moment, I choose to call forth compassion from within you. From this day forward, you will wake up and see these animals with a high degree of compassion, with a heightened degree of love. You will not know how this happened, but you will be reformed, transformed. Look, y'all. Even in using this as an example, I can feel that happening right now in the world. I call forth the compassion that I know is within you because you are an aspect of source, just as I am. I'm going to share a story with you just to demonstrate just how powerful this is, right? I was watching a Joe Dispenza testimonial from a guy who was sitting in meditation, in one of Joe Dispenza's meditations. And because sometimes when you're sitting in meditation, you can feel such bliss and such peace, and it can feel overwhelming at times, right? So there he was in meditation, feeling overwhelmed with peace, with love, with light. And he's like, in the moment when he was feeling that, he's like, this is too much for me. I'm going to start sending this to other people. And in that moment, he thought of a friend of his that was a drug addict, an alcoholic living on the streets. And he just pulled that person into his mind's eye. And he was like, he didn't even say anything about him, being delivered from drugs or anything. None of that came up. All he was doing was like, I have so much love arising within me now, just sending it to you, sending this love to you. I'm just sending this because I'm feeling it. I have too much. It's overflowing. I'm going to send it to you. I'm sending you the love that I'm feeling. I'm sending you that's all he did, was send him the love that he was feeling. And then that moment was over and he just went on with his life. Very shortly thereafter, that same person called him and said to him, I don't know what happened, but I woke up one day and I didn't have a taste for the alcohol. I didn't have a taste for the drugs. I'm going into rehab. And for whatever reason, I just had a feeling to call you. He had no idea what had happened. Is there any reason to doubt that when the thought of abusers come to mind and you hold a different focus for them, that they can be reformed overnight? They can wake up the next day and not know why they're feeling compassion to this animal that they just abused yesterday. That's how powerful we are. Don't stop with the animals. Don't stop with the children. Peel the label of abuser, pedophile, whatever. Peel the labels off and go to the soul of that individual and call forth compassion, call forth love, call forth light. But see, you cannot do that until you uncover your eyes, until you turn the light on in your own mind first. You cannot see past pedophile, abuser. You can't see past those labels if you keep the labels in place. You have to take the labels off and you go human, emanation of source, light, and you give them a new label. And when you are able to give them a new label, you can't do that unless you turn the light on in your own mind first. Paul Selig, who authors a lot of channel texts, beautiful line in a lot of his books, that says, you cannot hold another in darkness and be in the light at the same time. Write that down. You cannot hold another in darkness and be in the light at the same time. It's not possible. So anytime we're holding someone in the darkness of our mind, inside of our mind, they're in darkness. Well, we're right there with them. And when we hold others in darkness, we start to feel the effects of that. What does it feel like? I feel a lot of suffering. That's what it feels like. When we're holding others in darkness, when we're focused on the suffering rather than the light. And when we hold others in darkness, it starts to come out in our physical bodies as well as dis-ease. But when we hold everyone in the light when we see everyone in the light that they are, regardless of, because that's how Source sees them. I know it's hard to in your human eyes see it, but you gotta identify with the Source that you are rather than the human that you are in order to be able to see it. Oh, well, I can quickly answer that one. If source is guiding you to help a certain animal, whale, whatever, you just go into your healing right there. You don't have to go look it up. If source brings it to your attention, you don't have to go look it up. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with looking it up. In fact, if source truly is guiding you to locate that animal, like find out who they are by researching it, you will be moving in a sense of peace around that. Like you're unaffected. It's like you're just gathering data to amp up your healing energy. But if you start that research and you're focused on, then you're not allowing what the source within you really wants to move through there. So if you can research without any attachment and without any suffering, then it might be okay. But I don't know, I would say if source brings the animal to your mind, then that's enough. If the animal is already in your mind, if source says certain whale name, blah, blah, blah from India, you go, okay, bringing my energy to India, bringing my energy to that whale, bringing my energy to that elephant, and you just go with your healing right from that place. Or if you truly feel like Source is guiding you to research this thing, then do your research with no attachment and no suffering. Just peacefully do your thing in the world rather than being overwhelmed by suffering as you described previously. So you have a choice there. I mean, you can intuitively know, am I supposed to know more about this whale? Am I supposed to know more about this animal? Am I supposed to know more about this child? So you can decide for yourself if that intuitively makes sense. A picture helps me work on the animal. And that's fine. That's what I'm saying. But if you're researching it and getting more and more heavy, you're not helping the world. If you can get a picture and not feel and not go into all of that heaviness, you can't help. But see, now you're arguing for your limitations there. I go in and see what needs to be healed most. I am not in your shoes, so I don't know what your agreement with Source was and what your calling is in the world. All I can say is if you're expanding suffering within yourself, you're expanding suffering within the world. And you're saying, I can't help but feel the suffering that animal is experiencing. So you're claiming, see, right in that statement, you're claiming your own powerlessness. When you say, I can't help but feel, what you can say instead, what you can embrace instead, what you can claim instead is, whenever I hear these stories, I feel a lot of compassion. But when you say, I am suffering because they're suffering, that's a choice. You can feel compassion. And, if you do feel they're suffering so strongly, because I know some of you are real empaths and you can feel it, be the witness of the suffering you're feeling rather than going into it. You know what I mean? You're saying, is it possible to feel their suffering and not feel suffering? Well, you're coming from the premise that you have to feel their suffering. If you're a healer that's always feeling suffering, you're adding suffering to the world. So if you're a healer and you want to not add to the suffering in the world, you have to find whatever is your own path to, I maintain my peace in the midst of this. A lot of times what happens with healers is they're feeling everything that they're seeing and their whole entire bodies are falling apart because they don't see how they can feel peace in the midst of it. What I would say to you is to move away from the whole suffering focus. You've used the word suffering so many times. It's so evident that that's a very strong part of your energy field. It doesn't have to be, right? You can start saying, you know what? That's not where I'm going to place my focus. Have a conversation with Spirit. Show me how to feel peace in the midst. It's possible to feel peace in the midst of knowing what's going on in the world. It's possible to feel peace. But there's two things that's going on. You're heavily identifying with the physical body. That's one way to live life. And you can heavily identify with the source energy within you. Again, I ask you, is the source energy within you suffering? The answer is absolutely not. And if you are identified with the source energy within you, you feel less and less suffering. But if you are identified with the human body that you're in, the stories that this world offers, of course, you're going to be suffering a whole lot more. But if you bring yourself to the place in you where source energy abides and you are not, and source within you is not feeling suffering, you can feel compassion without suffering. But you have to let go of your heavy bent on suffering. Even removing suffering from your language because it's so heavily embedded within your psyche. I know of animals who can use some healing. rather than I know of animals that are suffering and I can't not suffer if there's, I know of animals that need healing, and I'm so privileged to be the light that brings more healing to that corner of the universe, that corner of the planet. Do you see the difference in energy that you feel when you speak it that way? I get to be a light source for animals that can use more of it. I get to be a light source in areas where they can use it. I get to be a light source in bodies that can use more light instead of the abuser, I get to be a light source in the world. You don't have to just keep talking about suffering, but you've used it so much, you've referenced it so much that it's embedded in your psyche, but we're all powerful enough to reprogram. So you can reprogram and program that word out of your experience and just talk about what you want. Instead of, I want less suffering, I want more love in the world. I want more healing in the world. I want more compassion in the world. You don't have to keep referencing the word suffering, because the more you speak it, the more you write it, the more you experience it. I hope that makes sense. As I was starting to work on the elephant, I realized I needed to send healing and balancing to the captors so they would not continue to abuse the elephant after I stopped working on them. Yes, and if you continue to focus on the abuse, see, the way that you worded that is like, I'm trying to get them to stop what they're doing. So you're wrapped up in the story still. So what the shift in perception is, I'm not even wrapped up in the story. I see you as an element of source, regardless of the story. I see you as a vessel of compassion, regardless of the story. Because if you're coming at it from, I need them to stop doing what they're doing, you're still focused on the abuse situation. And the more you're focused on that, the more that expands. So if you just focus on the human, that's a human through which compassion can flow, through which love can flow. It's kind of like when the guy was feeling all the love and he sent it to his friend who was a drug addict, abusing drugs or whatever. He wasn't saying, get him off the street, let him see that. No, he was just saying love, love, love. He wasn't focused on what his friend was doing that he felt his friend needed to stop doing. None of that was going on. He was just like, I send you love, I send you love, I send you love. You don't have to focus on what they're doing and the details of the things done in darkness. You don't have to focus on any of that. Focus on their capacity to love, their capacity to feel compassion, their capacity to be the truth of who they are, the light that they are, the capacity for them to see that they are light, without any focus on any kind of abuse happening. And I feel complete with that particular bent. I'm gonna move on to relationships now. And there are, I think, 3 or 4 relationship ones, but let me just focus in on this one and then I'll expand it to the other ones, and we'll, again, go to the 5 premises that we're working with today. One of my family members is narcissistic. Is that a label? You can't see them any other way. Not possible. Not if you continue to refer to them in that way. I researched the signs of narcissism, and they have all the signs. Why are you researching that? Because the thought knocked. The thought knocked and said, why don't you research narcissism to see if this person matches it? And you said, okay, sure. There was no space between that and you doing that. But when you create space and you become conscious and you turn on the light, you turn on awareness, you go, no, why don't I research how to heal relationships? When I go within to see what my higher self has to offer with regard to this circumstance that's unfolding. You added, it's difficult to interact with them, and I'm concerned for people they interact with as well. Much like the person with the animals, the concern isn't coming from what's going on. The concern is coming from where you're choosing to place your focus, and from where are you seeing. So let's go to the premises. My focus is my superpower. I can affect my inner and outer world using the power of my focus. So if you focus on narcissism, what expands in your world? That's a focus you're choosing. So you're choosing for that to expand in your world. Pretty soon, the more research you do on narcissism, everybody starts to look like a narcissist. Everybody in your family is going to start to show signs of narcissism. I don't even know what the signs are, but everyone in your family will start to look like it because that's where you're placing your focus. So it has to expand in your experience. It's difficult to interact with them. I don't doubt that some relationships can be difficult. Somebody wrote in about having a really difficult relationship with their mother. So I don't doubt that we can go through the experience of difficult relationships. Premise number 2, however, I can choose to live in a state of inner peace no matter what is happening externally. Premise number 3, my inner peace comes from within because there's a place in me where source energy abides. Premise number 4, I can choose to see from the perspective of the story or the perspective of the source energy within me. I can choose truth versus illusion. So let's go down that path, right? Much like the animal abuse and the child abuse, we have to turn the light on in our own minds first. If the light's not on in your mind, then you're holding that person in darkness. You can't perceive and experience anything other than the darkness around that story, right? So oftentimes we point to things out there and we go, how do I fix this person, this situation in the world, and we're pointing out there. Well, you start here. So you choose to see differently. You choose to see differently first. And you go, this person is an aspect of source. They're an aspect of source, then there's an element of light within them. If there's an element of light within them, there's a possibility that that light can expand within them. If that light expands with them, then there's a possibility that compassion can expand within them. And see, that's where you go with your focus. Sometimes it requires some space because especially when you're living with someone who you've had this perceived challenge around, it's very hard to wake up every day and perceive light and perceive and experience peace, but it's possible. And we have to hold on to the possibility, right? It's possible for me to see peace in this. It's possible for me to experience this from a peaceful place. So let me explore that. Let me research not research narcissism, let me research how to experience peace in the midst of contrast. I'm going to watch 10 videos on how to experience peace in the midst of contrast. I'm going to read 2 books on how to experience peace in the midst of contrast. And if you place your focus there, that has to expand in your reality. It's universal law. So let's go to the moment in time that you're having some kind of contention with the person. The mind will always say, fight back, right? Before, you already know that this person is showing up in your mind, in your life, and the probability of contention is just there because you've both formed this habit of contention and argument and seeing differences of opinion, whatever it is. You've formed this pattern and you're engaging with that pattern, right? So before you're in the room with the person, you have to go within. Because if you're in the moment, now you can move to peace within the moment. I've had that with a family member where there's a happening where I just go inside and I stop talking. And my choice to stop talking gave me the ability to center while they're going on. I even took a deep breath in that moment. It was like, and they're going on with their reasoning and why da. And I'm like, why? Because I can choose peace in the midst of this. Right there, smack in the middle of it, I can choose peace. But it's even more powerful to choose peace beforehand because you know the pattern. We know the pattern, okay? So when we turn on the light in our own mind first, like when you walk into a room that's dark, you can grope around in the dark, kind of figuring out where to go, bumping into things, right? But when you turn on the light, when you flip the switch, the darkness automatically disappears. Contemplate that for a second. When you turn on the light switch, the darkness automatically disappears. So when you uncover your eyes, you turn on the light regarding that person, you turn on the light on your perceptions of that person in your own mind. Forget what's happening out there, what they did yesterday, what they did, what they said, blah, blah, blah. Just forget all of that. And you go, how am I perceiving them? As a narcissist, let me drop that label and let me come into attunement with who I know that they are. Now, I know some of you will be like, well, you don't want them to stay in there and be abused. And look, if you're in an abusive situation and you do not feel safe, move on, get yourself safe, and then work on yourself. Don't go to working on the person, work on yourself, right? Work on yourself first. Because you can run from the situation, but there's some magnetic thing within you that attracted that situation. And if you don't look at that, if you don't choose to stop and look at that, then you're always running from people and always trying to erect boundaries. I did a video on boundaries, a YouTube short on boundaries as well. You can erect boundaries all you want, but there's an energy attracting the thing that's causing you to set boundaries. So you can go through your whole life erecting all these walls around yourself as boundaries, or you can go, wait a second, why don't I work on what's attracting this, right? You can go to safety, right? Put up your boundary, whatever, if that's the best you can do in the moment. But at some point you have to take the boundaries down and be willing to look at what's actually attracting those experiences, right? And if you're not willing to look at that, then you spend your whole life erecting boundaries. And it's exhausting to be erecting boundaries all the time. Why not erect a vibrational boundary, which wouldn't be a boundary at all? It's just, I have a vibration such that these kinds of people don't really make it into my experience. And I don't have to deal with that because they're not a match. They're not a vibrational match to me. So they can't make it into my experience. Therefore, I don't really need to set boundaries. I just have a vibration going that kind of takes care of things, you know? So, but let's go back to the moment in which narcissistic behavior is happening. You can choose peace in that moment. You don't have to engage. Engaging is an option. You can walk away, right? You can walk away to your own peace of mind. You can choose peace in the midst of it. You can have no response so that you give yourself time to choose a response rather than reacting in the moment. You can choose to see from the perspective of the source energy within you as well. But I will say much of this comes from you spending time with you. It has nothing to do with the other person. The person that's coming into your experience is just sort of magnetically being drawn to whatever energy you're swimming in. And if you're labeling them narcissist, then you have a perception of them such that they have to show up heavily narcissistic in your experience because that's your perception and your expectation of who they are. So how do you turn the light on, right? With regard to this person that you're really a mother, sister, brother, whatever. It's like, oh, they've done so much to irritate me. There's a history of irritation regarding how we interact, you know, as either as family members or a spouse, significant other, whatever it is. There's a history in how you interact with each other. So you've both formed an expectation for life to continue in that way. But if you can take some time apart from those interactions where you're at peace with yourself and you're tuning into yourself and you're in a quiet state where you're able to see them, much like seeing the abuser and the light within them and calling forth that, you can call that forth in anybody. If you have a family member that you just argue every time you get together, it's an argument and they treat you poorly and they have this thing going on, right? In a moment of stillness where you are tuned in, right? This is where you have to be awake, right? Awake enough, not unconscious, because you can be unconscious in the story, all wrapped up in the story, but she said this and I said this and she should have never done this. That's all story and illusion. Truth is, you're both light. Truth is, you're both an aspect of source. Truth is, there's so much possible here. Neither one of you can see it because you're wrapped up in the story. So premise number 4, I can choose from where I'm seeing. So you start there. You go, okay, I've been seeing this from inside of the story. If you try to look at things from inside of the story, you just see more story. So at some point you have to go, you know what? I've looked at this enough from inside the story and there's enough drama there. I already know that. So how can I look at this from outside of the story as a light being, as an aspect of source? How is source seeing this? How can I tune in to the predominant part of who I truly am that's not this story? See, at some point in our lives, if we wish, don't have to, but at some point in our lives, in our journey, in our spiritual walk, we can choose to wake up so strongly to the fact that we are not these physical bodies, that we identify really strongly with the non-physical aspect of who we are, such that the physical aspect of who we are diminishes in our experience. And I don't say that to be irreverent to the physical form, because we're here to be human, we're here to have these human experiences, but it goes back to the quote that I had put up. Your inner peace is not dependent on, derived from, or disturbed by the character's experiences. And the more we go along, at least this has been my experience, the more we go along on our spiritual walk, our spiritual journey, if we are willing to see things differently, if we're willing to continue to evolve and to wake up, this physical form and all of its experiences starts to shrink. It starts to shrink, and we start to see, like, it becomes more normal to see this physical realm as an illusion. It becomes more normal to see the perspective of source as what's actually real, and to see what's going on in all of these different stories that connect with human characters. It becomes normal to see that as illusion. It becomes normal to see that as just a temporary character being played out. It becomes normal to see that as not truth, and to see the perspective of the source energy within you as truth. And so now in my experience, even though I'm having human experiences every single day and I'm doing the human dance every single day, there is this far more expanded awareness at play that I can pull into any moment of the day. And even if I'm having an unconscious moment, there's a greater awareness at play even when that unconscious moment is happening, such that I can bounce right back to this expanded awareness, and everything that I just experienced in the character in the story, it goes like this. And joy arises, peace arises, confidence arises, certainty arises, and the story just continues to shrink, and the worry just continues to shrink, and all of the elements of this physical human experience, it just begins to shrink. It's like it's playing out, but it's not affecting the deep peace that comes from the awareness that I am not separate from the source within me. Last summer, I did that whole playlist called The Ultimate Manifestation. And I often say when I create videos and I do events like this, whatever comes out of my mouth expands in my life experience, greatly expands in my life experience. And what motivated me, what inspired me to do that playlist called The Ultimate Manifestation is because I woke up to the truth that there is nothing I could manifest on this planet that feels more important than the manifestation of me living my day-to-day life in this ongoing predominant awareness that I am not separate from the source within me. That's the ultimate manifestation. Money, cars, all those things, illusions. This thing, this awareness that I am not separate from the source within me is the ultimate manifestation. And if we can choose that as the number one thing we want while we're here, everything else sort of flows out of that awareness. Confidence comes out of that awareness. Boldness comes out of that awareness. Sure-footedness comes out of that awareness. Clarity comes out of that awareness. What I've experienced is everything tumbles out of that when I made that the thing that I wanted most. So back to having challenging relationships with others, first step is always turn the light on in your own mind first, because if you hold another in darkness, there you are with them, right? Turn the light on in your own mind first. Just like when you walk into a room and you flip the switch, the darkness disappears. When you flip the light switch on, when you flip the light on, capital L light, when you flip the light on in your own perceptions first, the darkness that you witnessed in this relationship dissipates because you instantly see it differently. You see them differently. You see you differently because the light is on now. You're not operating in the darkness. The light is on and you're seeing things differently. You're seeing things from the perspective of source. When the darkness dissipates from your own mind, now you can bring it out into the world. Now you can bring it out into the relationship, but it has to happen in your own mind first. You have to feel the light within you first. And as you feel the light within you, without even a single word, it's kind of like that story where the guy just sent love to his friend without a single word. Transformed, his friend is transformed without a single word. And even if that is not transformed, this is the beauty. I'm going to talk about triple layer of peace and triple layer of suffering in a second. I think I want to wrap this one up. When we are feeling the light within us, we can't help but see all that is possible for the relationship. The labels are gone. The perceptions are gone. It's like I see things in a new way. And even when challenging things are happening, there's a deep sense of peace going on as well. And that's when you know, oh, wait. And this is what started to happen for me. It's like something challenging or disturbing or whatever, agitating, whatever is happening. But I'm also just witnessing it. Like I said I think it was possibility number 5 in the last video that I did on how to end the cycle. I can become the cameraman in any moment. I could become the witness in any moment. And I can just witness what's happening. And I feel not really pulled into it. And when you practice just witnessing what's happening within you rather than being involved with what's happening within you, what's happening within you starts to dissipate quite naturally. And there's not a whole lot going on where you have to fight with it, you know? It just evolves on its own because you turn the light on in your own perceptions, you turn the light on in your own mind, you turn the light on within you first, and then everything is affected by what you choose to embody, what you choose to expand in your own perceptions.
And as we close, I just wanted to remind you to always take only that which resonates. Because your higher self, your inner being, your soul, your spirit knows what is relevant for your unique personal journey at this point in time. And it's always wise to check in with your heart to see what genuinely resonates and move forward with only that. And know that you are always free to fully trust your inner guidance above any external guidance you may receive. See you soon.